Today on Lightning Bugs, I guess they're monkeys that you hung out with in Bali, the macaque? Macaques. They stole my glasses once.
How is finger painting going to, make me successful in the world? But they don't understand that in their daily lives, that making a lunch, that actually can be incredibly creative.
I had him send me a voicemail to turn into a song. That an orangutan that he had worked with,
and there was this one young orangutan named Nancy,
used to sing.
She was pretty amazing and pretty musical, and she did it for fun, so that was pretty cool.
Hello people, this is Ben Folds. You're listening to Lightning Bugs, conversations with me, Ben Folds. Today we have Agustín Fuentes, a renowned biological anthropologist and primatologist at Princeton University. He's written various books, including The Creative Spark, which I really got into. The book focuses on the whys of creativity. It speaks to the evolutionary reasons for art and collaboration, and it illustrates how creativity is key to survival. 1, 2. Agustín Fuentes.
Yes.
Really good to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Where are you?
I am in, or just outside of Princeton, New Jersey, in a place called Skillman.
Oh, okay. I just started this podcast not long ago, so I'm getting my podcast chops. And I'm used to being interviewed rather than being the interviewer, But as I'm going through, guest of the things that sort of, what I might need, speaking with artists about creativity, and one of the first things that came to mind was find me an anthropologist to explain this. And
that's not a common thing.
But I'll tell you, and then I'll just feel like I just kind of want to put a quarter in your head and press the button and have you just talk. Here's how I kind of came to I need an anthropologist. I've been, over the last decade, advocating for arts funding a lot. And when you start advocating for arts funding, you have a set of arguments that hasn't really been thought out much, but we all like art. And so it's like, I wish you'd spend money on art. That's good. I realized really quickly that's not that compelling with senators and congressmen, right? So then you move on to, well, there's the educational side of it. Little more. Economy. And economy gets their attention even a little bit more. Where I find I kind of lose people is along a lot of the same places that you hit on in your book, The Creative Spark. People are the ideas animals. That's one. People would still be in the middle of the food chain if it wasn't for creativity and ideas. Therefore, we should invest in that. If you go to argue for the value of art and the value of creativity, where do you begin?
Art, right? Writ large. Creativity, imagination is what makes us human, and it's what allows us to be successful on the planet. That's the sort of baseline. People are like, well, so what? What does that mean? How is finger painting going to, make me successful in the world? And the bottom line is, okay, well, let's talk about it in 3 different ways. First, creative activity, what we call art or symbol or even play often, actually is critical to building all the connections and proper functioning of our brain and bodies. Art actually helps us learn how to be adults, right? And keeps adults learning how to be human. The second thing is that art brings us together, right? Sort of creative activities, imagination, force us to think with others, to put stuff together, to collaborate, teaching us all of those skills that we need. Humans by themselves don't do very well. We need others. We need to collaborate, coordinate. So it sort of gets our brains ready. It teaches us how to cooperate and collaborate to get stuff done. And I think really importantly, it provides us with the fuel, the juice, the spark that we need to actually make it in the world. And so to not support arts, to not get kids and humans of all ages involved in creative activity, imagination, and expression, whatever that form takes, is actually doing damage to our lives, damage to our societies. And if you want to sort of throw that in, damage to economies. There's tons of evidence about depression and happiness, about productivity, about sort of connectivity, all of those things. And so it's all there. The problem is you got to lay it out and it takes a while and people want a snappy answer. And the thing, creativity is all around us. So it's hard to say like a 3-word, this is why you should buy it.
It isn't art right here in its little corner. And then there's real life. If you're creating the economy, well, that's creative. Do you draw that sort of, you've got to be an artist to make art, or is art is everywhere? Where do you stand?
So it depends on what you mean by art, right? So
Yeah.
art, right, is the product of creative, imaginative activity, frequently in collaboration with others. In that sense, we can talk about painting or music or other kinds of crafts as art, but we can also talk about the structuring of an economy, right, as a product of the same processes turned in a different way, right? So to create an amazing oil painting, right, there's a whole bunch of stuff and training and thinking and imagining and working that goes into that. Those skill sets are involved in stuff like fixing a car, right? Figuring out how to stretch a paycheck to the end of the month. We forget is that we're all using the same systems. And so to enrich those systems, to train them, to live with them, that's how we get good at being human. And art is that central feature.
In the Creative Spark, you sort of make a stand for art being collaborative at least as much as it is individual. And in a time where we're really celebrating the individual to the point of almost being selfish. When you think about collaboration in art and the way that has formed people, those of us, and that's everyone who makes things, collaboration, like how does that work for us all? Maybe just talk a little bit about collaboration and from an anthropologist and a human's point of view.
So here's the very first thing about collaboration that's so amazing. Our brain, right? That it's connected to the rest of the body. The brain doesn't do anything by itself. It's all connected, but the brain is so important, the neurobiology, those structures. So your brain's resting state, right? The human brain, when it's at rest, when you're just not doing anything, it's in what we call the social state. It's in the same state as it is when you're interacting with others. So when we're alone and resting, our brain is turned on and social. And that's because that's how we learn, how we engage, how we grow up and become human. So when I talk about collaboration, it's often that some one individual does something amazing, but that one individual, as you just said, was using a piano built by other people, was learning tunes that others have written and taught to that individual, was trying to emulate the kind of music or information or sounds or experience that they heard somewhere else. When we're by ourselves, and we're by ourselves a lot now in the contemporary lockdown pandemic, we have to remember that we're never alone actually in here. Our brain's resting state is one of interconnection. So we're always thinking with, about, and through others.
Is that based on brain scans where you're just having someone sit and watching what lobe of the brain and what area is responding?
I was going to say, there's this like basic network that when you're doing nothing else, it defaults. It's called a default network. And it is the one that is active during social interactions. So for humans, the default is the social.
So do you think that the creative mode is still in that default, or do you think that going to the creative mode is something that we need to access actively?
What happens with this creative mode, and this is what you could call in the zone, right? When you're doing whatever that art that you do, that creativity and everyone who does whatever they do well, when they have it, they get into this place and you almost lose yourself, right? You don't articulate specific things. You're just on and you're doing whatever you're doing. What's amazing is that's the social network plus a whole bunch of other things. So the social network is on, and then you're drawing from these other things. And what's really amazing when you're in the zone is that the connections between those start to sort of fuse. All of a sudden, the experience you have is all of that stuff communicating together. And that's where new sort of imaginative stuff comes up. That's where these capacities called mental representations that are detached happen. And that means humans have the ability to imagine something that we've never seen, never experienced, right? Never heard, but because we put things together in this novel way, it can show up. It's like an internal collaboration, right? All the stuff is working together. It's like when I'm sure when you find something on the piano that just is right, the first thing you don't think about is all the pieces, right? It's the sense of right.
There's a part in your book you're talking about, if you're living in a landscape that has conflict,
Right.
That's conducive to creativity. So I would think that something about survival and knowing that you had to solve a problem must help connect these collaborative parts in your brain.
In any good story, right, can't be all perfect. And it's the things we run into and have to move around, over, under, or deal with. That's what sort of gets us to that next level. Failing is actually one of the most important things. And talk to any amazing, I'm sure, when you're sitting at a piano over the years, how many times have you failed as opposed to how many times has it really worked?
Over the day. Yeah. A story is very boring if it's all one big success. I mean, it has no dynamics.
And I think people don't realize this because then they think of only these major creative acts, big acts of art or something like that. But they don't understand that in their daily lives, making a lunch, that actually can be incredibly creative when people separate art from life.
Yes.
It's just not the best idea.
So I'm doing, the little question and answer stuff, which is I found really interesting and fun because it's about my life, but people more wanted to talk about creativity than they did my life. And I was down with that. This guy came up after one of them and he just seemed kind of sad. He's like, man, I'm so bummed that I don't create anymore. I'm not creative anymore. I used to be creative and now, because of my job, I'm not. And I was like, well, what's your job? He's like, I'm a scientist. I was like, I can't think of anything more creative and more honorable. And talk about failure. I mean, someone's in science, right? I mean, one great failure, something that you thought should be one way that you prove you were wrong and it takes your whole life, is a great accomplishment you don't get your name on.
My failures are what has catalyzed better understanding, better theory, better methods. And to say science isn't creative, right? Science is full of failures because that's what you're basically trying to do, is prove yourself wrong all the time. But science is so creative. And that scares me, though, when people who are, involved in science or technical jobs or something are like, oh, I'm not creative. I'm like, well, that's sort of scary because I want the person, designing the car I drive or the plane I fly in, I want them to be really creative. Every one of our idols, every one of our heroes has had way more sucky days than good days. I think that's important. People forget that and they don't represent it. And it's like starting with Beethoven. It's like starting to say, here, learn this. I mean, yes, that's a good thing to aspire to. But if you hold that up as the only good possible outcome, you're just going to mess with people's heads.
Okay, it's time to go to the Peanut Gallery and get some questions and comments and mix it up a little bit. Ian, hit it.
Hi, Ben. This is Ian from the UK.
Hey, Ian.
I have two children, 9 and 10, and quite often they will struggle to start something that has a creative element, maybe something that hasn't got a right or wrong answer. There's almost a fear of it not being right, whatever they do.
Right.
And I wondered if you had any thoughts on why this is, and B, any thoughts on kind of conquering their fear of the unknown.
That is the whole thing. You've hit on the whole thing. It's fear of not just completion of something, but fear of even thinking of an idea that's not good. And it's crippling. We have to get them used to failing. I'm not a teacher. I had kids as well. It's as close as I've ever come to teaching. We'll see how that worked out. They're 21 years old now. It's that fear of failure that even gets to the point where you don't have an idea. As far as an exercise, I think there's nothing like failing and laughing at it, just relaxing about it. An example would just be performance failure, which is you make your own rules when you're creating something. I'm playing with a symphony orchestra. The night before, they had an incredible opera singer singing, who everything was absolutely flawless because that is their job and that is the expectation. That has been set up. But when I'm playing, I'm singing out of tune some and I'm messing up. I remember one night playing with an orchestra and I hit up one part in the song and I just went, I mean, I'm with an orchestra. It's like, that's awful failure. I'm getting paid. And I did. I laughed it off. And I thought while I was doing that, it's like, I wish I were more like this in everything. I wish I weren't so uptight about failure and other things, but I, for some reason, am very lucky to be okay with it in that instance. Came up to the same part of the song, songs tend to repeat. That part came up again, and I thought about it. I thought, oh, okay, I'll try to get it right this time. I messed up, and I laughed, and the audience laughed. And the point of that was to me that a lot of art is discovering things together. And a lot of art is having bad ideas that you have to dig out of and make good. The things that happened right after were great. Greatness happened, and everyone got to see me suck, recognize that I suck, but even as important, because you can't just suck all night, is dig out of that hole. Let's not just laugh off the failure. Let's see if we can make something out of it. Miles Davis, make a mistake once, it's a mistake. Make it 3 times, it's jazz, something like that. Maybe an exercise because teaching kids is just so consistent, so constantly reinforcing the things that you don't know if they've remembered from yesterday. And you just keep pounding them. At some point in their life, they remember one of those instances, and the seed that was planted, actually does grow, and they go, oh man, I remember back at some point, and the lesson actually sunk in, sometimes not in the way that you intended, and sometimes they remember it in the way that it didn't happen, but it does come out. Own the failure and try to turn it into something awesome. That is where the art is, and that's the thing that should be the scariest, not the mistake. The mistake is or the failure, the thing that the bad idea, whatever you think it is that you've judged too hard. Got to take the judgment out of it, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it's the reason why more people don't get to fulfill their creativity anymore. And I think just the fact that you're thinking about this, they are going to benefit a lot from that. I hope that helps. Thanks, Ian. I guess they're monkeys that you hung out with in Bali. The macaque, they're called macaque. Macaques. They stole my glasses once. I didn't heed. That's what happens. I didn't heed the advice, and I was like, come on, I'll be fine. I'm gonna get out there. I don't have a wallet or anything. Didn't think about my glasses, and he was hanging out on my head and stroking my head, and he was lying his ass off. He was like, yeah, right, you're cool. Right. I love you. And he took my glasses and he ran, a little son of a bitch. I'm out there with no glasses at this point. I don't know what he did with the glasses. Did he sell them?
One of my former students, a wonderful scientist named Jeffrey Peterson, has been doing work on this robbing and bartering in Bali, where the monkeys at this one site will target folks, run up, jump, grab the glasses or a sandal or a bag that they're holding. And then the local Balinese in that area will follow the monkey and then offer him a trade, some food. So the monkey will swap the glasses for food. He'll get the food. And then the guy will go back to the tourist and say, here, I got this for you, and maybe ask for some money. And so the monkeys and the local folks have got it down to sort of get the tourists for their goods.
Well, and this is amazing because the monkeys are now identifying the value of things. If I'd had a phone, I imagine he'd have been taking the phone because he would have known the value of it. I mean, lying and with an animal like this, I mean, that's what it is, isn't it? Like, he was deceptive.
But he was also learning. So what's amazing, and this is part of creativity too, this doesn't happen everywhere with monkeys all over the place. Many places, monkeys, if people wander around, they'll jump up and take something from you just because it's shiny or it's fun or they're just having a good time. In some of these places, though, they've learned, like tourists show up, they love these things. If you take these things from the tourists, you might be able to get a goodie in return. And that's actually really creative because they do trial and error. They do better as they grow up. So when they're really young, their success rate is really low and they get better at it. And it's amazing because you can watch them. And if you know what you're doing, you can watch the monkey and the monkeys will sit there watching people come in, right? And they'll be like, oh, that one. And then they'll slowly trail this guy for a while to wait till he sits down or is not paying attention and then grab the thing from him. And so it's part of this development. So it's not so much that the monkeys are intentionally lying to you, but they're trying to work the system as best they can to get there.
I felt worked. You do find so many artists that are exceptional are what I would call almost under domesticated. And you use domestication, you talk about domestication a lot, which is what brought that to mind, because sometimes I feel overly domesticated. I mean, maybe you feel like going out in the middle of the street and I don't know, humping a manhole or something like that, or just screaming or something, but you don't, because you're confined by civilization and your behavior is supposed to be that. But that also narrows the possibilities of what you might think.
Here's what I would say. Are they really messed up people, or are they just evidence that there are many successful ways to be human? Our society is messed up. We tend to think like there's one right way to be, there's one thing to do, and like, oh, this crazy wacko artist, making all this stuff. Oh, I love his art, but he's crazy. Like, no. You say you love his art. He's doing his art in this particular way, or she's doing this kind of music, or they're doing this kind of project. And you think they're weird, but the problem is you're short-sighted, right? The people who think this.
Yes.
And you're, I wouldn't say over-domesticated. I would say just straight up uptight and having given up the capacity to really understand the entire range of being human. So many people who do great art do so because they don't fit in a given society, because the rigidness of gender roles or behavioral stereotypes or assumptions about what you're supposed to do as an adult, that they don't feel that way. Societies take away a bunch of the options. And what happens is a lot of people find art is the way to get back into society, is the way to do their thing and be who they are.
So much of what you talk about as an anthropologist in human evolution really plays against all these myths of the most aggressive hunter monkey dominates and makes more babies, that it's not necessarily the way that we were.
This whole idea of like the successful jock and the cheerleader, this like trope, this idea that there's one successful way to be a guy, there's one successful way to be a girl, there's one successful way to be in business, and it has this like hyper competitive, aggressive. It turns out, look around, everyone in our daily lives knows that actually doesn't work. Those people are miserable. They usually don't have success. And yet we succumb to this restriction. And there's where art helps, right? If you let kids do a bunch of art, they don't feel forced to have to conform to a particular thing. And yet we still buy in to these restrictions on how we're supposed to be us.
Because all these people come to me so frustrated about writer's block. All writer's block is fear. I don't see it as being anything else. I think you're so good at being afraid of failure that your idea actually gets edited at the subconscious.
Well, this whole idea of self-censorship, right, which is what you're talking about, we have to remember, let's go back to that social thing, right? It's not the individual. You're not censoring yourself. You're actually letting these expectations of society and assumptions of norms and rules into your head with you and telling you that the stuff you're coming up with that probably isn't good, but man, let's give it a shot. You're letting the expectations of society tell you that you're wrong before you've even done it. Like you said, it doesn't even come to the surface. Then that's going to mess everyone up in their own self-censorship, in their own sort of inhibition. And it's going to make us uncomfortable human beings. And it makes us worse at being human.
And actually, as a creative person, I find that as soon as I'm established with my rules, now I can be creative.
And that's why you have to learn the basics, right? I mean, you can't. So, for example, I use this all the time describing Picasso, right? Everyone's like, oh, Picasso, this incredible, if you like his Cubist stuff, right? This incredible Cubist stuff is amazing. He went off and sort of helped to sort of expand the surrealist movement, all this incredible stuff. But I tell people, yes, he did. But look at the work he was doing between about 19 and 24 years of age, right before the Blue period. He was doing the masters, the classics better. It was amazing. He learned exactly how to do the work so that he had the capacity and the freedom to do more. So yeah, I'm not saying don't learn math, right? But learn math to be able to understand math, not to be constrained by getting your homework done. It turns out that there's different ways to be successful in the animal kingdom, right? And there's all these amazing, now humans, we're very distinctive, right? So let me start there. So lots of organisms are cognitively complex, really intelligent, really smart. They're really social. They make tools. They do all kinds of stuff. Like if orcas, killer whales had thumbs and legs, I'd be really worried. So all these other organisms do amazing things, but humans don't look around the world, classify our own species into different groups, isolate some, take children away from their parents, ship them across borders, create unequal economies and horrible political systems. We do some particularly distinctive things that nothing else does. So we're very good and very bad at being human.
Yeah.
But other organisms, I mean, octopuses are amazing, right? The cetaceans, right? Whales, dolphins are just their social complexity and like these histories, like these pods of killer whales where the old females teach everyone how to hunt and the whole pod hunts in one way, and that separates them from another pod that hunts in a different way, and they don't mate together because they hunt different ways and have these cultures. And I could just give example after example after example. We are at the same time the most creative, compassionate, and the cruelest and worst of everything alive.
It's easy to think of us as devolving somehow, and you think about the collapse of Western civilization a lot, and idiocracy when you look out there. But I don't know if I've ever. I feel like we're living amongst some of the most incredible thinkers, and also evolution, just almost elevation of awareness ever. At the same time, we're going full planet of the apes on one side, and on the other side, we're just doing amazing things. Is that the way people have to be? Do we have to just keep doing that?
Yeah.
Can we just chill?
It's the curse. It's the curse of creativity. And the truth is, no, we can't just chill. Humans never just chill. We're always like, oh, you know what? We're all together. This works great. This is excellent. We're all good. And we'll be like, oh, but you know what? Check that out over there. Maybe we could go over there and it would be better. There's just no way. We never sit still. Like I have so many colleagues that are like, you know what? AI is going to save us. It's going to make better science. It's going to make better cars. It's going to make better everything. AI will program computers and then they'll come up with better stuff, or take over the world. Right? That's the freak out everyone has. People don't understand. AI are basically algorithms, right? It's basically programs that we create and tell the computer, here's your baseline, here's the way you work, go out and take stuff in. So yeah, they grow, they learn, they move, but we program them, right? So all algorithms, and particularly a lot of AI, is made with our own biases, right? It's made by us. Even if we program an AI to think outside the box, it can only think within the box that we program it to think in and out of.
I feel like if we weren't so time stupid, I couldn't tell a single story, because I've got to make someone feel like a lifetime is being described in a 3.5-minute song. But I'm going to use a 2-second or a split-second example to stretch that out. And if you do it right, we're all there. If we're all around the campfire at the end of the day and we're telling stories, we really feel like suddenly we lived through an entire day just in a couple of minutes. At the same time, we seem incapable of learning from history as a species. And as much as we try to anticipate, we seem to be really incapable of looking forward.
So storytelling, right? Storytelling is time travel. You're absolutely right. It's our ability. Everyone wants a time machine. We have the time machines. Those stories take us. They take us places. Really, we feel them. We embody them. Our brain, our bodies, we sense that. A song can take us places. It can move us. You're absolutely right. So storytelling is time travel. So then you would think, well, if we're capable of time travel through storytelling, then we should be able to look at the past, right? See what's going on now and predict the future. Whoa. We don't, or we do it really poorly on average. Now, we actually can. We can do it well, but what we forget is that the past is dynamic. The past is a bunch of stories. I mean, stuff happened, but the way that stuff that happened is with us today is all these different stories and structures. And so the way we think about the past is actually based on all the stories and the narratives and structures that we were told or lived. So when we use that to predict the future, we actually are frequently missing a bunch of critical stuff. The fact that most of our world is made up, right? Because we're crafting and constructing this. We're constructing this niche of belief and of experience and putting that forward. That's why we frequently forget the stuff that was really important that we should have paid attention. The pandemic's a perfect example, right? We've gone through this kind of stuff before. The SARS one in 2002, 2004 came out. We knew exactly. I was involved in some stuff back then where everyone who was working on was like, okay, this is coming back. We got to be ready. Here's what's going to happen. And we all knew that. And people were like, it's been 15 years. Let's not even pay attention, because new stories emerged that captured our attention.
It's always going to be something that is just, I can't get my head around it.
We think too much. So here's an example. This great. So there's this, they did this study with a bunch of humans and chimpanzees. Tetsuro Matsuzawa in Japan did this study. We've got this video screen, right? And really quickly, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spread in different grids on the computer screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 show up for like a second, then disappear, right? They get covered up by little squares. And then you have to remember the order in which they appeared. If you can remember the order in which they appeared, you get a treat, right? So test a bunch of graduate students and postdocs and researchers, and they're okay. They're like 1, 2, what was that? They're not very good at it. Any chimpanzee, even a young chimpanzee who gets trained on this initially, you just watch them. They throw up 12 numbers for a second, then block them all over, and the chimp doesn't even think. Chimp's like, ooh, treat, treat. What happens is that humans, most other organisms have this space-time layout in their world that is focused on what they do. Where's the food? Where's the sleep? Where are my friends? Where are my enemies? How do I navigate this? Humans, our best thing and our worst thing is that we can't go from 1 to 2 without thinking. We can't just be like, what's out there? We're like, what's out there? Oh, but how am I really thinking about this? Oh, what do I think about that color? Oh, what is this time? Oh, am I late? Oh, what happened this other day? We're thinking too much. That creativity, that imagination makes us, as you said, time dumb, because we don't just link 1 to 2 to 3 ever.
And of course, you're using your brain when you're creating. So I don't really like saying thinking too much, because but there is a certain kind of awareness where you choke, and it makes me wonder, since the chimps are good at that, since I wouldn't say it was a favorable bit of evolution like that. Like, certainly not all evolution is, there's spandrels and all kinds of stuff that we don't need. What kind of natural selection can possibly happen for us over the next tens of thousands of years that might get us over that hump? Don't we have to get over that hump? It's like, it seems like that's a real problem. It's the same thing where we're elevated, amazing thinkers, and every time we get cooler in one way, we become dicks in another. And then the smarter you are, then suddenly the more you think, and you think too much, and you can't. Certainly there must be some way to break that.
Back to what we started with, collaboration. That's why we have to work with other people. That's why we have to together, because we can check each other. So while we're trying, just stuck in our own heads with so many thoughts and so many things going on, that's why we talk to people. That's why we collaborate on things. That's how we get around it. That's the magic. That's our superpower, right? The collaboration gets us around the overthinking. But that's not easy, right? Collaboration is really hard, and it's harder now than it ever has been. And you can see that when collaboration breaks down, the overthinking, the bad thinking, the cruelty, all of that emerges and flourishes.
I need to get you to give us what I'm calling New Week's resolution, which is something for all of us, artists and not artists, creative people, to do as an exercise if you were the boss of us for the next week. Any kind of exercise that we can actually do that might jiggle the brain in such a way to help enhance creativity. What would you give the class?
The first part is the next time you do something that requires assembling or producing or manipulating, whether it's cooking or putting together something, a piece of furniture, or, working on your car, whatever things that has to do with assembling things and like getting something from that. I want you, while you're doing it, to step back, to stop, and see how amazing everything you're doing with your hands, your mind, your thoughts, your learning. Just take a second, right? Even if it's just making spaghetti and a red marinara sauce. Stop and think about all of that's going into that, just to recognize how amazing these quotidian day-to-day things are. So that's the first thing. The second thing is based on what we were just talking about. if they can, and look around, someone during the next week, stop and look at an animal, look at a non-human animal just for 3 minutes. Just watch it. Don't think, right? Try not to like interpret anything. Just hang with it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I
And
like that.
that's going to help you sort of think about the world and the way things are in the world, and to sort of stop assuming and trying to impose our order or our structures, and experience it through another organism just for a few minutes.
Are there too many people to collaborate with? I mean, there's the 250 people figure you bring up a couple times, which is I've heard that before.
I don't buy that, but it's true. We can only connect with so much immediately, but we have incredible ways to connect. But you do bring up a point. There are almost 8 billion human beings on the planet, right? And it's not just so many people to collaborate, but it's to feed and to house and to clothe and to take care of and to work, get along with. It is harder now. It was easier when, there was a group of 20 of us over here and 200 of us over there and some other folks that live in the other valley. We actually got along okay. You didn't see everyone all the time. It was sort of a little bit easier. Now we're just in our face. Everyone is in everyone else's face all the time.
The more people in the audience, the more in tune they are. That is crazy to me. And it implies sort of a course correction component of people. But do you know anything? Is that actually a phenomenon? Because they are dead in tune. If you have 4 people, they can't get there. But if I've got 400 people, man, they just start to really hit A440 together, and none of them half of them can't even sing.
So there is this good thing about larger crowds or larger groups, because there's all this variation, but it evens out, right? And that there's not just one cue. So like you said, with 4 people, we're all looking at each other, trying to work off each other individually, and we can hear each other individually. With 400 people, right, that variation gets sort of swamped, and you get just the overall patterns. And that's why you can get that harmony. But it is interesting because it's easier to get people together in a mob or a crowd when they're all in the same place. Now, when you have large groups of people separate in different places and sort of not experiencing the same thing, that's when you get real problems.
Sort of what we're thinking about is something you brought up in your book, which is the capacity to work together and be empathetic, compassionate, cooperative is the same thing that puts us in groups that cooperate against another group of people. And we're just doomed to be I was thinking, came into this like we're the ideas animals. And I think we're like the contradiction animals.
Put it this way, we are the ideas animals. We're the imagination and creativity animals. It's just that sometimes the outcomes of those ideas are really bad. And I do make a great point. I try to stick to this in the book. Look, on average, they're not. On average, they're good. On average, people empathize. On average, people get along. Like if we just look at what we're doing in our daily lives, we actually do this. We got this being human thing down pretty well. Yeah. And if we could just remember that more, I think we might be in better shape.
Did you ever see, there's Henri Cartier-Bresson was doing, he's the big Magnum photographer, a famous photographer from the 20th century. And he was doing a lecture. Apparently he didn't like doing lectures. And someone asked him some big complex question. This is kind of going back to something you said earlier. It made me think of it. And his answer was, it was about art and how do you think about it and overthinking all kinds of stuff. And he said, I recently saw a scientist had a bunch of chimpanzees with Polaroids, just snapping Polaroids. And he said, not bad at all. Have you ever seen any experiments like this where they give any kind of apes or monkeys cameras, things, and let them create?
It's more what I've really seen, and actually I own one, is art by chimpanzees, art by painting. But what's amazing though is these are frequently ones that are in captivity that have raised around humans. But I mean, they have color palettes. You can tell they're doing stuff that they're enjoying. And, some of them I find them aesthetically pleasing.
Not bad.
So
not bad at all.
We are not alone in that. Now we're much more technologically savvy. And so, I wouldn't expect any other critter to really get a camera because there's a lot of steps there. I've written about this too. I mean, I've hung out with monkeys and with different animals and checked out sunsets over the Mediterranean, looking from the Rock of Gibraltar and seeing Africa on the other side of the Straits of Gibraltar there, and just sitting with monkeys looking, and I look at them and they look at me, and I'm like, we're seeing the same damn thing.
Isn't that crazy?
And so that sense of awe and wonder, I think that's pretty widespread in the world. It's just we've become really good at capturing it in certain ways, and I think that's pretty incredible.
I worked with an orangutan once.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't on The Apprentice, but I was sitting on the floor like it was in a music video, and I enjoyed the experience. I do understand the advocacy and people not wanting them to be worked like that. At the end of the day, I didn't feel good about it. You know, I'm sitting here with, I think Bang Bang or something was the name of they gave it some shitty name like that. Should have called it Oscar Wilde or something.
Yeah.
I'm sitting with Oscar, and I was told not to look too much. But we're obviously both the talent on the set. And I'm sitting there, and then I feel its hand reach out to hold my hand, which I was also told not to do. But, you know, like, so I was holding the orangutan's hand. I looked down, and it's actually its foot, which was a whole other thing. Yeah. But I got so much communication, and maybe I'm crazy. I feel like the animal told me, it's okay, I do this all the time. We're going to get through this. Was so empathizing with my position. Am I crazy to think that? And do you think that's where communication began before we had metaphor and symbols and grunts?
Absolutely. So, no, first off, it's an ape, right? And apes are incredibly empathic, and we're apes. I mean, we have this sort of close relation. And orangutans, just to say, are some of the most empathic, amazing creatures on the planet. They get it. But the way you just described, I am 100% sure that's exactly what he was conveying to you. And you knew that. It's like, I mean, because we're mammals, we're primates, we can share a lot of information. I mean, if you have dogs or cats, you know, you can also share with other mammals you sort of share the world with, because we have the same limbic systems. We use a lot of the same modalities for interpreting things. But then we lay on this stuff, language, and that's great and highly problematic at the same time.
Well, man, thanks for your time. Really, really nice to talk to you. And
it's great to talk to you. Really great, fun things to talk about.
So after my conversation with Agustín, I had him send me a voicemail to turn into a song. It could be anything he wanted. I had no idea what he was going to do. But he picked up on our conversation when we were talking about my working with an orangutan on a video set. And he sent me a song that an orangutan that he had worked with for years named Nancy used to sing. It's an actual motif with a rhythm to it. And apparently they would snap their fingers with it. So he sent this to me, and I'll show you how it goes.
So it was something like this.
Now he's a primatologist, so he's not snapping in time, but his singing, his vocal was dead on. So I've taken that and I've built that as a motif into a song. Now, obvious within that motif is the syncopation, but I didn't want to make a caricature out of that. What I was the most interested in was combining that and the sort of dreamlike state that I've felt around those kind of animals when you make a connection with another being like that. And he's spent years out in the field with these animals, and they become his friends. So I wanted that as part of it. So what I used for that is I downplayed the percussive element, the syncopation element, because it's already inherent in the song, in the motif. And I used a piano, which I had at my disposal at the moment in lockdown, an out-of-tune acoustic piano, and I strummed the strings with the sustain pedal down to give it a dreamlike effect, sort of a zither sort of effect. So I put this together, building that until I felt like it had played out, and then we come back to reality at the end of his voice note. Here's how our song goes.
Hi, Ben. This is Agustín. Since we're talking about orangutans and you asked for a little thing for a theme, it reminded me back to the late 80s when I was actually doing work with orangutans in southern Borneo. And there was this one young orangutan named Nancy. he used to come up and hang out and always make the following noises, and we would all snap our fingers to her noises. So it was something like this. Ooh, 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 ah, ah, 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 ooh, 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 ah, ah. I don't know what you can do with that, but she was pretty amazing and pretty musical, and she did it for fun. So that was pretty cool. Something that just came to mind. Hope all is well. It was a great chat with you. Thanks. Bye-bye.